Welcome to the Library House.
Crystal Palace Skate Park.
Welcome to the Stanley Picker House.
Welcome to Ealing Village.
This is Tooting Back Lido.
Welcome to the BAPS SHRI SWAMINARAYAN Mandir.
Welcome to Salters Hall.
This is Peter Barber Architects in Enfield.
Welcome to Kingston Guildhall.
Hello and welcome to the Biggin Hill Memorial Museum and Chapel.
Welcome to a very rainy Dalston Curve Garden.
Hello everybody, I'm Gomit Sian and welcome to the Phoenix Garden Community Building.
Welcome to Walters Way.
Welcome to the Siobhan Davies Studios.
It's the Crystal Palace Dinosaurs.
Welcome to Leadenhall Market.
Hello and welcome to the Mill Street building at the Kingston School of Art.
Welcome to Glenkerry House.
Hello, welcome to Honeywood.
This is the story of how Little Holland House began.
Welcome to Millfield.
Witamy w ambasadzie RP w Londynie.
Welcome to Whitehall.
Welcome. This is our building, 15 Clerkenwell Close.
Welcome to Kingston University's landmark townhouse building.
This is the story of the Moorbrook Green Link.
Hello and welcome to Billingsgate Roman House and Baths.
Welcome to Kingston Museum.
Welcome to the Crystal Palace Bowl.
Hello, this is the launch of the Open House Film Project. We'll just go around and introduce ourselves. So I'm Ella McCarran, I'm the Deputy Head of Open House and I was one of the producers on the project.
I'm Nima and I'm one of the assistant curators at Open House and I was also one of the producers of the film series.
And I'm Jim Stevenson. I'm a filmmaker and a photographer and I made about 2/3 of the films that are part of the series.
Yeah, you made 2/3 and pretty much defined what they were going to be, didn't you?
Yeah, well, we did the first one. That was it.
So the way that, let's just talk a bit about how the project started out, because it began, I think we were having conversations about it in May, I believe, which was when it was peak lockdown. We were under the impression that building visits weren't going to be possible at all. And one of the ways that we came up with was to have these film tours. Initially, we were thinking they would be more like virtual tours and be first person. And then as the conversations went on, we decided that they'd be this more presented with guides formats with speakers that had a connection to the place. So I don't know, Jim, from your perspective, what was it like being approached with this kind of project?
It was really interesting. I mean, during lockdown, my job kind of ceased to exist. I couldn't work for about 3 months. So when you got in touch and asked me if I wanted to do some films, as many as we were talking about, I've been shutting doors all for months. I was ready to go. And then just the initial brief, which was to do much shorter films, was really exciting. But actually, I think when we had the discussions and we started to expand them a little bit, or the idea of them, I think it just became infinitely more interesting. And then we started talking about buildings and what our sort of wish lists would be. But I think we kind of met a pretty common ground, which made the whole process a lot easier when we started talking about what we didn't want. And we didn't want those kind of really sort of cheesy, come and visit kind of films. I think that's when it all kind of felt like it tied together at that point.
Yeah, I mean, even just now looking at the list of, there's over 30 that we've made in this whole project, just remembering initial conversations that were at like my kitchen table and my laptop was up on some recipe books, and now it's this amazing like series of films. It's really crazy to think what's been done in how many days? I think
40 something days.
Yeah, it's about over
49 days.
49 days, over 30 films, which is just crazy. And it's been because a lot of hard work from all of us. Obviously Edward Bishop as well joined us halfway through the project when we were trying to match all of our demand for films. So there were days when I think we were making like 4 a day, weren't we? Which was a lot of hard work, but I think it's really paid off when you see the types of films that we've got. So the first one that we were going to show was actually the first film we did, which was the Tooting Bec Lido. So I know I was really excited about this one because I grew up near there, I've swum there before, I have family friends that are there, so I was really keen that we did it. And it was interesting. It's not somewhere you'd think of as being the subject of an architectural film initially. But I think we got really lucky. Janet Smith, the speaker, was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, we did. It wasn't, when we talked about making a series of films about architecture, it wasn't top of this. I mean, the architecture of it is really, really interesting, but it's an outdoor pool. So the architecture is changing rooms and the entrance, and it is like a landmark and really historic. But you're not talking about like, Lloyd's of London or something like that. It's not like a huge piece of big capital A architecture. But when we started talking with Janet, we just realised that the stories there were so important. It was quite odd photographing it or filming it, empty.
Yeah.
Because of lockdown and everything. It felt a little bit like we were in a Hollywood film, but the stories were just great. And listening to her talk about, things like how it felt to swim a whole length on your own and how important that was, and was just really, really interesting. And that it just defined the series, I think, with the first one.
Definitely. I think the focus on the community and the people that use the space, told by someone who actually uses it, made such a difference. And you're right, it really set the tone for it. I think we're going to show it now. So here it is, the first film to premiere of the Open House film series, which is the Tooting Bec Lido.
This is Tooting Bec Lido. It was the idea of a local vicar who was looking for a scheme to help unemployed men. And we know that about 400 men were employed on digging out this pool and creating it, basically. And they did it in a period of 3 to 4 months. And the story goes that a group of men called in on him at the rectory one weekend and begged him to help them in some way, find them work of some kind. It was built in 1906, so it's well over 100 years old, and it's been in continuous use ever since then. In fact, the Lido stayed open during both the World Wars, so the period of closure we've had because of COVID-19 has been one of the longest periods of closure the Lido has ever known. And during the World Wars, one reason the pool was kept open was because it was a source of water for the fire brigade. It's filled with unheated water, cold water off the mains, and there is 1 million gallons in total of water in this pool. It's 100 yards long by 33 yards wide, and if yards don't mean a very great deal to you anymore, that is more or less twice the size of an Olympic pool. So it is enormous. And the first time you swim a full length on your own, it is the most enormous achievement. You feel you'll never get to the other end, and when you do make it, it really is the most fantastic, euphoric feeling. Shortly after the Lido opened, a group of swimmers here got together and formed a swimming club, the South London Swimming Club. And that club still exists, and the Lido is still our headquarters. So the swimming club is as old as the Lido. Being down here becomes an extension to your own family. I myself have been a member of the club for well over 20 years, and there are many other people I've known throughout that 20 years. And so we've seen each other through various ups and downs of life, and it's made a huge difference being able to meet up here at the Lido. In the early days, the pool was really for men and boys only. Women had very little access. They were allowed to swim one morning a week. These days, of course, everyone is welcome, and we have a very vibrant community here. There's actually one chap I met recently down here. He's been a member for over 60 years. Wow. He's in his late 80s, and he joined when he was 27. And in the next breath, he said to me, "I don't even like swimming."
Wow, so that was film number 1. Jim, are there any particular parts of that that really stick out for you when you rewatch it?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. The stories about, this is the longest it's ever been closed was really fascinating. Even like during the war, it was kept open. Was really interesting. And like I said earlier, the thing about, I love the bit when she talks about how important swimming a whole length was. But what I really enjoyed when we were filming it was those little, almost off-camera moments with little anecdotes, like at the end of the film when she talks about the person who's been swimming there, who doesn't like swimming, who's been swimming there for however many years. I really loved that. And when we put it in the film, it wasn't planned and it wasn't scripted, and we put it in the film and it just worked so well that really became a kind of marker for the rest of the films. And Janet was just so enthusiastic and so warm about it all.
Well, she was excited to be back there because, like you said, it had been closed. I think we were the first people that had been there that weren't lifeguards for a few months at that point. And actually in the film you can see on the board where the pool temperature is the last date it was open, which is I think 19th of March or something like that. So it's this kind of weird, like you said, a bit post-apocalyptic because it hadn't kind of been touched since the last day, that when they didn't know that they were going to be closed for so long. So the next one we're going to talk about is the Picker House film, which is the home of the artist Stanley Picker. And I think I've described it to people as, it's essentially Disneyland for the 1960s, is how I kind of felt when I first walked in there. So yeah, do you want to just talk a little bit about what it was like to film there? Because it was a very different location to the first one.
Yeah, it was totally different. I mean, we were indoors the whole time. It was very much a piece of architecture this time. And yeah, really, really, really different space to film. Probably a bit closer to what I'm used to filming as my job outside of doing the open house films. But it was, again, I turned up with my architectural photography filmmaking head on, but the minute we spoke with the people involved in the building, you realise that the project is, the house is so much more than the architecture. The architecture is one beautiful part of it, but the stories that we learn, that we'll see in the film, were so fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. And the guide as well was really interesting because Joanna was amazing, but even then still very knowledgeable and still just such a different personality to Janet in the previous film. And like we said, as we went on, we found that the guides really set this lovely little tone to the film, and they kind of feel like they all have a different personality in them. And it did make more work to do it with a different speaker each time, and it would have been a lot easier for us to just have someone on a retainer and have them learn a script. But I think they're definitely they're better for having someone with a genuine connection to it, and it is much more interesting to see a different person with each film.
I think
it totally is
so nice as well, having people who are like the building managers or somebody who's local to the community. Like a lot of the time we were speaking with volunteers for the building, not even the person that was managing it, and then architects as well. I think you really see that through in the film series, like each one has a connection with the space in a different way.
The personalities that come through were so important that all the people, almost all the films have somebody who has a real personal relationship with the building, and then their personality coming through was such a joyful part of the film in all the instances, and that's what makes them all really, really different, aside from the fact they're different buildings, obviously.
Yeah, I think with the thing you mentioned at the end with having these little off-camera audio moments that go over the credits, I think those only worked and those only happen naturally because you had such a good relationship set up with them before we started filming, so it didn't feel like a commercial shoot where you'd come in, have something set up, shoot, film, done. You'd kind of already established a relationship with them, so I think that's why they come across so well on the camera. So this is the second film we're going to show, which is the Stanley Picker House, which is in amazingly a lovely little cul-de-sac in Kingston and not Los Angeles in the 1960s. So this is the Stanley Picker film.
Welcome to the Stanley Picker House. In 1965, Stanley Picker approached the architect Kenneth Wood to help him realise his dream of a modern home in which he could house his growing art collection. It was to be the start of a very, very successful working partnership between the two men, who shared a vision of a modern home sympathetic to the surroundings and the gardenscape around it. The house was designed to be filled with light and it floods through these floor-to-ceiling windows, filling the house with light and constantly changing throughout the day. Kenneth Wood had spent time over in Canada on a scholarship and had become very impressed with the post and beam technique, which would allow him to build this fabulous light-filled interior using this dark-stained Aframosa wood, which is both very durable but also flexible. And you're constantly having your eye taken outside to where the sculptures continue on the terrace into the garden. Stanley Picker was born on the Lower East Side of New York in 1913, his father having fled from Tsarist Russia in the late 1800s and come to New York and set up a very successful cosmetics business. His commercial genius was tapping into the zeitgeist of the swinging 60s. One of his most successful collaborations was with the designer Mary Quant. The two worked together to design a revolutionary new makeup line. As the strapline went, "Makeup to make love in." He was a phenomenal collector of art, but he bought art that he loved. He didn't buy it as an investment piece, although actually many of the artists that he befriended at the time were up-and-coming artists and have gone on to be highly successful today. The house was successfully completed in 1968, and then in 1977, Stanley approached Kenneth Wood to build him a gallery in his garden, both to accommodate the ever-burgeoning art collection, but also to provide a facility for students from Kingston University to come in and learn and study from his collection. Continuing his desire to support young artists, Stanley set up the Stanley Picker Trust, which continues to this day to support young creators across the full range of the arts. The house remains open to visitors at certain times of the year, so that members of the public can come and enjoy both the collection and the beauty of this house. In his master bathroom, he actually had them build the mirror to an angle so that when he was shaving in the morning, he could actually look at his sculpture at the same time. I can look at my own sculpture while shaving.
Okay, film number 2, the Stanley Picker House. Jim, any notes from watching that back?
It's really strange watching them all back because I know them all so well, because when you're editing, you watch it over and over and over again. And I just, it's really strange watching them now knowing that there's an audience for them, and it's not just the three of us watching them over and over again. So it's got quite an odd feeling, but that was a highlight for me. I felt like by the time when we went to film this one, I really felt at that point that I was on my own private open house, you know, because I never probably, that was one of those houses that I probably never would have found at any point, probably never would have been commissioned to photograph it because it's an older house. So to have the pleasure of being there and then hearing all about it was really interesting. And then for me, we worked quite hard on trying to get that opening shot where it's you, Ella, and Janet in the window, silhouetted. I really wanted it. I didn't know where I was going to get that in the film, but once you both stood there talking, I knew that we had to get the camera on it because that's kind of the David Lynch moment of the film. So that I was really glad we managed to get that into the film, because it was such a pleasure to be in that house.
It was nice. It was just really, it did feel so serene and so hidden. And actually one of my favorite shots where I think you get a sense of that is when you just see they had these lovely curtains that just made the light in the room change completely, and you've got this lovely shot of them kind of swaying in the breeze. But what I know is that I was actually crouched on the floor with a notebook doing that so that we could get that shot, so it looks beautiful and serene, but I was crouched on the floor just waving a notebook. So it's a little behind the scenes trick of the trade.
Don't tell everyone, they'll all do it.
No, sorry, the gentle breeze just wafted through the house naturally.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, no, that was a really good day, and I remember because they're incredibly private. They've got to be very kind of careful about how they publicize the house and who they allow access to. So we weren't sure how the day was going to go. And then, you know, they were giving us sandwiches at that lovely the dining table, and it felt like we couldn't eat. I mean, it is a home, and they did live there for a while, but it still really feels like you're in a kind of moment in time or a museum or something. It's just there's so much beauty in it everywhere that it felt like you weren't really supposed to sit and have a sandwich there. It kind of felt you were breaking the rules somehow.
It definitely felt a bit weird eating a M&S sandwich at the table. It was interesting because with all these films, because they're 3-minute films, there's always things that we can't include. Because with all of the buildings that we visited, I said this to all of the presenters, that we could easily do, you know, a 4-hour documentary about every single house, longer than that if we wanted to. And so there was always stories that we had to miss out. And what we didn't have in that film is a sense that somebody lives there, because it still has to be looked after. So they always have a caretaker that lives on site in the building, which felt really bizarre. Like, I don't know how you'd sit down to watch telly surrounded by all of that.
Yeah, with a Rodin in the corner, just casually.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone has thought that I've been talking quite a lot and lovely Nima's been staying quieter, it's because Nima joined us partway through the project. So we didn't have as much of her input on these first 2 films, but then you did join us. And do you want to talk a bit about taking it on in the midst of what it was, I think, August when you joined?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's been so long.
So I joined Open House as one of the assistant curators, and Ella had already started the project. And I think by the point when I joined, I think you'd done 2 films, maybe 1 film had been filmed already. So then I came on board because the film project was just growing quite massively. So it kind of needed more hands on deck, I guess. And then the first one that I went to, I think, is the film that we're going to watch now. So we did a full day shoot in Crystal Palace, and that was my first on-site shoot, which was quite an exciting experience, if not quite nerve-wracking. Definitely felt like, I don't know, wasn't entirely sure how it would go, felt a little bit imposter syndrome, but everyone was lovely and it was a great day.
It was a long day, wasn't it?
It was a very long day, a very hot, sweaty long day. I think it was in the bit of the summer when it was in a really intense heat wave, and me and Jim were doing 3 locations within Crystal Palace and sort of running around the park all day with equipment and not enough water. But it was
we finished it and we said we're not doing 3 in a day again. That was we definitely did try. We tried too much. I mean, it worked out, but that was I slept very well that night.
Me too.
I mean, that's the amazing thing about Jim as well, is that you and Ed, that you both just show up and you're a one-man band. You've got suitcases, microphones, everything's, you know, tripods are appearing out of duffel bags, and I think you can watch it and you know, I would believe that there was a full crew behind it, but it's you / Ed.
Well, it's us, isn't it? You know, because you were both doing sound sometimes as well. We were all basically just having to muck in of it all, because we couldn't. Maybe with Crystal Palace we could have had more people, but with Pick a House, we just wouldn't have been able to have more people in the space because we were trying to socially distance. But yeah, that Crystal Palace day was in an intense day of work, definitely.
Yeah, well, we actually have 3 for the price of 1 with the Crystal Palace films, because I think we were initially there was debate about having just a Crystal Palace Park film with these 3 locations, but it just turned out that there was so much to say about each of them, and there was so much great footage that they ended up being their own 3 separate ones. So now we're going to watch the skate park, the dinosaurs, and the Crystal Palace Bowl.
Tell me where we are again.
Crystal Palace Skate Park.
In the 1970s, skateboarding really hits the UK, and there's a massive boom in popularity. And indeed, in 1977, the first ever UK National Skateboard Championships were held in Crystal Palace Park. The commercial sector responded, and it built a load of pay-to-enter skate parks. About 100 of these were built all over the country. But unfortunately, most of them then died a commercial death. Skateboarding still continued though, and in the 1980s, Crystal Palace remained a big centre of UK skateboarding. and the skaters built their own half pipe. Around 2005, a lot of the councils and the charities around the UK realised that skateboarding and skate parks were really great ways to get people healthy in mind and body, and they started to build concrete skate parks all over the country as free open access facilities. Around 2014, some of the skaters in the Crystal Palace area got a petition together, said why don't we have a skate park in Crystal Palace? And the user group was formed of skateboarders and a BMX rider, and they worked with a professional skate park designer and a landscape designer to build the facility that you see here today. So the skate park's in 3 sections. There's a shallow bit, a medium depth bit, and then in front of us is the deepest pool section of the skate park. And I guess this is the reason why Crystal Palace Skate Park is particularly unique and well regarded. The pool is also got a strange architectural heritage. Alvar Aalto designed a curvy, kidney-shaped swimming pool for the Villa Marea in Nurmekko in Finland in the 1930s. This was then copied by Thomas Church for the landscape around the Donnell House in Sonoma County in Northern California in the late 40s, and that became a prototype for all the curvy swimming pools in suburban housing in California in the 1970s. So what you see here is in effect a copy of a Californian pool, which is a copy of the Donnell House pool, which is a copy of an Alvar Aalto original. The first thing really to understand about skate parks is they're not sports facilities. Nobody here is winning, nobody is trying to beat each other. And they're really community spaces where people come and hang out, challenge themselves, be with their friends. They're places where people of all ages, different backgrounds come together. And in my mind, they're one of the world's great kinds of public space.
Why is it the best skate park in the country?
Because it just is.
Because it is. It's just
it's amazing. Everyone here is nice. Everyone here is just
they're just a sense of like
it's just such,
friendships and like there's a big community here.
It's very homely. And it was well like this. Yeah.
I call it my second home.
Welcome to the Crystal Palace Bowl. The history of live music at Crystal Palace goes all the way back to the 1850s when, at the original palace, the huge Handel festivals welcomed up to 60,000 spectators under the nave, which was at that point the largest enclosed space in the country. Live music began here at the Concert Bowl in 1961 with the orchestral summer proms and pops concerts, and rock and roll truly arrived in 1971 with the garden party festivals. These became known as the Glyndebourne of hippie rock and saw some of the most incredible acts of the era play the stage. The likes of Pink Floyd, the Beach Boys, Elton John, Eric Clapton, Lou Reed, and probably most famously Bob Marley, who performed his final London show and his biggest ever UK concert right here. The Concert Bowl sits within a part of the park known as the English Garden landscape. It's one of the few areas that retains some of the original planting and landscaping from the Joseph Paxton design. Live music was first hosted here in 1961 underneath a temporary shell structure, which endured all the way to the early 1990s, by which point it had long outlived its original lifespan and it was time for a new permanent stage to be built within the park. A design competition was won by Ian Ritchie Architects, who produced this extraordinary sculptural stage structure in 1997. It went on to be nominated for the RIBA Sterling Prize. It won the Royal Fine Arts Commission Building of the Year and a Civic Trust Award. Ian Ritchie himself, before putting pen to paper and producing a design, likes to write a few lines of poetry or prose, and he was very conscious about the sensitive and historic landscape within which the bowl would sit. A design was produced which balanced gravitas and levitas, something which would be vibrant and open during the summer season and quiet and calm during the winter months. This is the first public building of its type in the UK to be clad in a Corten steel facade, and often draws inspiration from sculptors like Richard Serra, Anthony Gormley, or the appearance of a baldisseri cutting through the trees of the park. So the concert bowl has been inactive for over a decade now, and as you can see has fallen into quite a state of disrepair. It's known as a sleeping giant among London's outdoor venues and is affectionately referred to by locals as the rusty laptop. So our community group has been running for the past couple of years to try and reboot the rusty laptop and to find a new, viable and sustainable future use for the structure, hopefully as a multi-use venue with culture and community at its heart, and to see the return of live music at the Palace and have some new acts walk in the footsteps of legends.
How was that? How was it playing out there again?
Oh, it's lovely. Absolutely lovely. Yeah.
It's the Crystal Palace dinosaurs.
In the 1800s, paleontology was a brand new science. Fossils were being discovered around the world, and they brought with them an extraordinary set of ideas that there were animals and plants, landscapes that had gone before and were no longer anywhere to be found on the planet. There was this idea of extinction. It's an abstract idea. It's hard to get your head around that, and it was one that didn't really get translated to the general public very well until Crystal Palace Park was built.
The park opened in 1854, and this was the first time that members of the public were able to see scientific ideas that before then had been hidden behind closed doors. And one can imagine someone coming into the park, having a walk, coming around the corner and seeing these two life-size iguanodons and thinking, what on earth is this? And wanted to know more about it and wanted to learn more about it. And that was the idea that the artist had, was to bring together entertainment and education into the same space so that people could see them and ask questions about them and learn more about the world in which they lived in.
The sculptures are Grade 1 listed and have been recently put on the Heritage at Risk Register. They are officially classified actually as buildings. A number of them are hollow on the inside, and they are very big. In fact, in 1853, just as the park was being finished, they hosted a dinner inside one of the half-finished sculptures.
The artist who built these creatures was called Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins. You can imagine the artist in his workshop working with the scientists of the day to make sure that these creatures were represented in the best way that they possibly could be according to the information that was available. And representing that for us today are these two iguanodons. So they look very different, but they're representing the same animal. And this was because science at that time didn't agree on how the animal would have stood. And the artist decided that actually, rather than decide which one was correct, he would just represent both. And for us, this is perfect because it shows the evolution of science and the way in which knowledge develops.
The sculptures aren't representative of how we might imagine dinosaurs and other extinct animals to look today. But in that is part of the story of science, and that's what makes this site so important and why it speaks to us still. There is no absolute truth out there through science, but it's an improved understanding and improved knowledge. And that's what makes the Crystal Palace dinosaurs relevant for today. The vivacity of the sculptures, it was down to the skill of Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins, the artist. And that's what captured the public's imagination and what kept the site alive for the last 170 years.
So that was 3 films to talk about there. I really can't believe that you did that in the same day. It's unbelievable.
It was an intense day, and it was really, watching those films just makes me feel that temperature again. It was so hot. It's like 30 degrees. But yeah, it was so much fun though. It was because we started off, we were at the skate park first, and Ian, who's the presenter in the skate park film, had put a message on the sort of community Facebook group the day before saying, there's some filming happening if anybody wants to come and be in the film. And all these kids turned up who were just desperate to be in the film, and were just constantly hovering around Nima and I, waiting for us to put the camera down so they could make sure they were in it, which was just, it was absolutely perfect for us.
Yeah, I think I was saying to Nima when I first saw the draft for the skate park one in particular, when he's talking about it's not a space where anyone's winning, you're really there as a community. I cried. just cried. It's
good.
So good. And then, you know, you've got the concert bowl as well, you know, and you've got cellists and...
Yeah, that was amazing. The London Symphony.
Mozart
London
Mozart players.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, they came down to the bowl for us to film, or for Jim to film there. And I think Ollie, the guide for the film, was saying that was the first time anybody had performed on the bowl in a decade, I think it was. Which is just mad that we were there to capture that, and that they sort of facilitated that to happen as well. But I remember when Jim was filming on the stage, I was running around doing some sound and just watching like the people in the park relaxing, and then people were like applauding after the music was put on. It was so nice, so nice.
Well, we couldn't tell anybody that it was going to happen because we still, you know, you're not allowed to do gatherings, so we couldn't say there was going to be live music there. But there was a couple, I remember when we were doing our recce, there was a couple sitting off to the side of the pond that surrounds the stage at the bowl, who they were kind of sort of middle-aged couple, and they had a bottle of fizz and 2 champagne flutes with them, and they were obviously celebrating, you know, an anniversary or a birthday or something. And I was just thinking that they've just come for like a quiet lunch in a park, and we're about to serenade them with these world-class musicians as a little addition to their special day.
Oh, that's lovely. So yeah, those are the Crystal Palace films, and then the next one that we're going to show is all Nima's creation. This was
the Siobhan Davies. That was one of the first ones that I approached for us to go and film, and we did actually that film with Ed Bishop, who's the other filmmaker we were working with, and I think that was the point when the film series, it was becoming too much for even Jim to film 2 a day in. I mean, just getting through the number of films we wanted to do and the number of people that wanted to make the films. So Ed came on board, and that was his first film. And so the Siobhan Davies Dance Studio is it's a dance school, and it's a place for rehearsals, and it's designed by Sarah Wigglesworth, and it was a conversion of an old Victorian schoolyard house. And I was really keen to do a film of that space because it was by Sarah Wigglesworth, who's a great contemporary architect and a female architect, but also it's just a really amazing building, and some really amazing dancers. Like Siobhan Davies is a world-class choreographer and dancer, and the people who use the space every day are also like world-class dancers. So we were able to go in and actually film with some dancers who were rehearsing, and got to speak to both the architect, Sarah Wigglesworth, and the owner of the studio and the sort of dance school, Siobhan Davies. So should we watch that one now?
We should watch Siobhan Davies.
Welcome to the Siobhan Davies Studios. We designed it between 2004 and 2006, and we're delighted that it won an RIBA award. This is a dance studio made out of a brick school building, and the ideas behind it were looking at the relationship between architecture and dance. And so many of the moves that we made were about trying to break out of the constraints of bricks and mortar and play with ideas of repetition, rhythm, weightlessness, tension, gravity, fluidity, and so forth.
Touch is incredibly important to me as a dancer and choreographer. I want to feel the floor underneath my feet. and I want to feel the air, the ambience that I exist within, that I move within. And the building is so rich in a sense of touch. I can move from brick, the solidity of London brick. I can go to render and the roughness of the render. I can move over to the smoothness of the steel, how the steel hangs and the weight of the staircase is hanging on these. In fact, they move because it's a hanging structure, and it becomes like tendons in my body. I then can shift to the wire, and I have a sense of the musculature of the wire, the sort of neurological links, the synaptic links I might have in my brain.
When we first visited this building, it was derelict, and this whole area here, the foyer, was filled with a staircase which led to each of the classrooms all the way up. We decided it would be good to remove that so that this became one big space and you could see where you were and orientate yourself to the building. Having decided that, we thought it would be really nice to keep a memory of what was there before. So we demolished the stair, but we left the imprint of the treads as it moves up the building. We left the glazed brickwork and all the memories of the walls that attached here, and picked up on some of the colours that used to exist in this wall before. The use of light is really, really important. In the studio, it's used to illuminate the body and illuminate the space so that dancers can work very easily in it. But it also gives contact with the outside world, so you're aware of the city going about its business around you, of the weather and the seasons and so forth. So there's a sense of connectivity, but also withdrawal and focus.
What I love about working within dance and choreography is that I can use my full emotional and physical intelligence. I am made up of so many different materials which are very exciting to work with. What I love about how Sarah Wigglesworth has designed this building is it is the same. It's full of intelligence, it's full of materials, and when a dancer enters into this space, it is a place of wonder for them.
That was the Siobhan Davis film. Nima, anything that springs to mind when you see that? You said when we were watching it, she said, "I've seen this so many times now."
Yeah. I think that's the thing though, because like the whole project was so quick, and in terms of editing it, also you guys were taking them back to us really quickly, but just the closeness to us with the films. Now, I don't know, it doesn't feel like, it feels like a lifetime ago that we filmed that, but also it could have been, you know, yesterday as well. It's been a bit of a blur the last few weeks.
For me, it was nice when the films that I hadn't had much of a hand in myself started coming through to see. It was like seeing them how other people would for the first time. And when you see them and you don't have such a connection to the subject, or you weren't actually there filming, it's really nice to get a sense of what the project looks like to everyone else. And I absolutely adore Siobhan Davis. Sarah Wigglesworth, also lovely, but Siobhan Davis just talking about the brick and the wood, and not anything I'd thought about when designing a studio for dancers. You just think big empty space, mirrors, done.
I think it was so great having the contrast between Sarah Wigglesworth and Siobhan Davies, because they have like quite a close relationship anyway, and they were back and forth with the design when Siobhan Davies approached Sarah Wigglesworth to make the building. But seeing them both in the same space, talking about the same building, but in very different ways, it was just a really, really amazing filming day.
Yeah, and again, just having someone that actually uses that space, talking about it, and then someone who designed it, and they've got such different views of it and relationships with it. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's quite strange having, for me, I mean, the schedule had got way too much that we just couldn't I couldn't physically film all of them. But when we were talking about what buildings we might want to do right at the beginning, that was quite high on my list. So it was the first one that I couldn't do was one of the ones that I most wanted to do, partly because the building is incredible, but partly also because I know Sarah and we've been talking about making a film together for months outside of open house, for months and months, and we haven't been able to sort out timings. And then the one time we got this thing together, I couldn't do it because I was out filming a different thing for open house.
I remember we came on the day, the first thing Sarah said to me was, "Where's Jim?" And I was like,
but it was, Ed and I had a chat beforehand, and I sort of talked about the structure that we'd started to form for the films, because we I don't know if this is interesting or not, but we had, in each of the films, we had about 4 hours to film, which is an incredibly short amount of time. I would normally take, you know, for Sean Davis, we could take 2 days potentially filming that. So 4 hours is really short. So we had to arrive with a plan, and not a script, but like a real plan of what we were going to talk about. So we, in advance, we'd do like a phone call with everybody involved, everyone who was going to be in the film, and then Ed or I would go away and write out a sort of storyboard, and then pass that on to the speaker, so that when we arrived it was all really efficient. But even then you can film for ages, and then and so being given a pair of dancers as well to be in the space is like a joy, because you've got all that amazing beautiful movement. But I've spoken to Ed a lot about this film, and it was the same thing as you were saying, Nima. He was just really excited at the contrast in the 2 ways that Sarah and Siobhan spoke, both with passion, but just in completely different ways to each other, about exactly the same thing, about the same building. It was just absolutely beautiful.
I think Ed we were speaking about when we were watching it, the sort of reveal shot at the end with Siobhan Davies, and I don't know if you can notice, but Ed is actually walking backwards, and I'm behind Ed, making sure he doesn't fall over and hit a wall. But the smoothness that he did it, and that
it could be on like a pulley so easily, but it's just
Ed. It's just Ed walking backwards.
No, what you were saying, Jim, about the architect and the people that use the space being in it, I think with having people that use the space talk about it is kind of what open house is largely about, that the people that do the tours, usually the people that people speak with, are the people that actually use the space. And designers will always speak very differently about somewhere and have lots of interesting things to say about the spaces, but something we wanted to recreate was, if you did an open house visit of, say, Tooting Bec Lido or Siobhan Davis, you probably wouldn't have the designer and the architect there, but you would have someone that actually has volunteered their time and is passionate about the space doing it. So that's what we wanted to recreate, that it's less of a informative lecture, although you're getting information across, but it is just largely understanding someone's relationship with it.
That was really important, and the personalities, like we said earlier, the personalities of these people, and you see it if you watch all 30 films. Some of the personalities are just absolutely brilliant. And I mean, they all are obviously, but some of them really come across a lot. So it was so important to get that kind of personal nature across in the films.
So we're coming to the last film that we're going to show. So I guess if we're closing the conversation out, what's the kind of takeaway that you've had from doing this project, Jim, other than never do anything with open house again, because we'll ask you to do 30 films in 49 days?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I mean, you know, because we did shoots together and we've had so many phone calls together. There were points where it was incredibly stressful. The logistics, I mean, that was all both of you doing all of that. I didn't really have much to do with the logistics of organising the calendars. Must have been a complete nightmare. But the end of it all just came out really well. And having to work at that pace for me, which is, my films are known for being slow and not, hopefully not boringly slow, but, you know, very slow, very calm and meditative. And these films were like flipping that around. So it's quite interesting for me to realise that we can do that. We can create entertaining films. And to create 30 films in 49 days, I don't know if I did 30 films in the whole of last year. So it was pretty incredible. I'm really excited for them to be out there and to see if people watch all of them over the weekend.
Which they should. Every single one. No, I do hope people do that. I think it would be a really nice mix, and I hope that people maybe come for a film of somewhere they do know and they would have liked to visit, and then they end up seeing a film for somewhere that they didn't even know existed in the first place. Nima, anything you want to say?
Well, I was filming this morning, so I'm still in that film mindset. But no, I'm so excited that this is happening and that they're all going to be live, and we're going to actually share them with people after having worked really hard and really intensely with you guys on this for the last few weeks. But But also, I think it'd be great as a new addition that these films are going to stay as an archive on the website. So they're not just going to be there for the weekend, and hopefully there'll be something that Open House will continue to grow and add to.
I think so. And I think the fact that when you think about, you know, however many hours of content we've got with these films, they're free and they're for anyone to access. And I think that's amazing. And again, it's part of what Open House is. And what we wanted with these videos was to bring people some kind of engagement and access with the buildings, even if visiting them in person wasn't remotely possible. So now we're going to play the last film made by the dream team of Nima and Jim, which is the London Mandir, which is more commonly known as the Neasden Temple.
I am Sadhu Yog Vivek Das. Welcome to the BAPS SHRI SWAMINARAYAN Mandir here in Neasden, London, also popularly known as the Neasden Temple. A mandir is quite simply the home of God, a spiritual sanctuary where one can experience peace, serenity, and a connection with the divine. Underlying every traditional Hindu mandir is an ancient and exact science which has been detailed in the Vastu Shastra. The Vastu Shastra refers to an architectural text which gives details of each and every aspect of the mandir, all the way from laying the foundations, all the way to the final dedication ceremony of the temple itself. This London mandir is based on a tradition that goes back thousands of years. And this mandir has been constructed using stone without any reinforcing iron or steel. Some 5,000 tons of Bulgarian limestone and Italian Carrara marble were shipped to India to be hand carved by 1,500 specialist artisans. All those pieces of stone, some 26,000 pieces, were then shipped here to Britain and assembled like a giant jigsaw puzzle through a labor of love by hundreds of volunteers. Ancient Hindu builders envisioned the mandir not merely as a sacred structure, but as an actual form of God, with its various components representing parts of God's actual physical body. So for example, we have the Kalash on top of the spires. The Kalash, the golden pots, represent the head of God. The flags fluttering above the Kalashes symbolize the hair of God. The shikhars, the pinnacles themselves, they symbolize and depict the shoulders of God, and the murtis represent or depict the soul of God. Serving the local community is an integral part of the Hindu ethos. This mandir, therefore, not only serves as a place of worship, but also as a center for community outreach activities. It is a place where worshippers, as well as members of the local community, can work together to serve society. A mandir is thus a place where architecture and art come together to provide a divine experience.
Akshara Purushottama Jaya, Akshara Purushottama Jaya, Darshana Sarvotam Jaya Swami.
So that was the last film in our selection of premiere films, which is Neasden Temple. What was it like filming in somewhere I cannot believe is in Brent? No offense to Brent, but it just looks like it's on another world.
Kamlesh, who's the guy who was showing us around and who we were liaising with when we set up the filming date, he introduced it. It's like there's 3 iconic spaces in Brent. You've got Wembley,
yep.
You've got Neason Temple, and the 3rd one, what is it? We were like, I don't know, what else is in Brent? It's like IKEA. It's like, okay.
So that's then one spot above IKEA.
Essentially.
That could be our next location, is the Brent IKEA.
Well, the high priest, the head monk who's doing a tour there, at the end of the whole film, we were just having a conversation, and he said to me, have you ever been to India, Jim? And I said, no, I haven't been yet. And he said, well, you have now. And that's how they see it, as it is supposed to be a small part of India, in Brent, and it's just amazing. And that was a really difficult one to film in some ways. I mean, it was really easy in some ways because you just, everywhere you look, it's just visually so generous. But that means that that of all of them, I could have spent days and days and days there. There's so much to cover there, and they were so generous as well with their time and everything.
Yeah. So we've come to the end of the films we're premiering tonight before they all go live at 9 AM on Saturday the 19th, and after they will be free to watch forever, which is amazing. And as you can see, we could probably talk about each film individually for about 10 minutes each, but that would be a very, very long stream, so we won't be doing that. But closing out of all the ones we've seen, I just wanted to know, because it's really interesting, we've all got, even in the office when we've been showing them, everyone's got a different favorite, everyone's got locations they like, presenters they remember. So out of the ones we haven't shown, what are the films that really stand out for you guys?
I think my fave, I have to say, is going to be the Walter's Way film, which we actually filmed on the same day as Neasden. So we did the Walter's Way in the morning and then legged it up from South London up to Brent. To film that. But yeah, it's a great film. It's a beautiful film, and also it's just so nice because we had 3 different guides or like speakers, and they were all residents of Walter's Way, and they'd all built their own homes. So they were speaking about how they'd made their own homes and how it had how they'd shaped it and how it had shaped them, I guess. Yeah. How about you, Jim?
I mean, we made 30 films, so it's difficult to pick, but out of the ones that we haven't shown, I'm gonna say Little Holland House. That's my tip for if you're browsing through them on Saturday. Check out Little Holland House, because for me that's a classic open house building. You could walk past that 100 times and know nothing about it. From the outside it looks like a very, very normal house, but the minute you go in you realize visually it's completely different, and the story behind it is actually just a really beautiful story of 2 people who were in love and completely obsessed with of learning how to do every single thing in their own home. So they learned how to make the chairs, they learned how to carve, they learned how to do the paintings that are on the walls. They learned everything, and it's a good story, that one, I think.
Yeah, I think for me it is one that I was familiar with already, which is Salter's Hall, which I just love because it's got this shining-esque carpet that is so great to me. I think I loved it in particular because we had as one of the speakers, I think they've appointed their first female master in the 600 years they've been going, and she's about to become the 2nd female master. And there's a shot of her in her robe, and she's got the medal and the fur, and behind her are these 3 very dour looking serious men, and she's just at the forefront, and I just really liked that as a shot setup. So that was one of my favorites.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, and because obviously this is going to be the start of hundreds and hundreds of open house films, where do we want to go next?
I mean, there's a couple that I think are already kind of on the table, but won't
couldn't possibly say.
Yeah, I couldn't say that. I would love to make a film of the Belarusian church, which is a memorial chapel to the Chernobyl victims. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. I would recommend everyone Googling right now. How about you, Jim?
I mean, there's a lot, obviously, but because my job is mostly going to new buildings and making films about them, the ones it's a pleasure to go to older buildings. So Crossness was a great bit of Victorian engineering by think it's by Bazalgette, I'm not sure, but it's this beautiful decorative pumping station in SE2 that I would love to make a film about. The story about that is amazing, and it's been restored. It looks great. But there's also other places like Wilton's Music Hall would have been great, and Dennis Sever's house would have been really interesting. Yeah, I have a list that is hundreds long, but we will get through them.
Yeah. See, it's funny because all three of us are from different backgrounds, different interests. So even on the same project, our suggestions are very different. I personally would love to go behind the scenes at the Natural History Museum where they've got all the stuff in the jars and all the pickled things. I just sweeping shots over those. I would absolutely love that.
You can do that.
I'll do that one. Yeah. So thank you everybody that watched and tuned in for our discussion about the Open House film projects, and just to look at a fraction of the films that are going to be available on Saturday the 19th of September at 9 AM. And a reminder to go on the Open House website and look through all of our listings and see what's online, what's in person, what you can do as walking tours, self-guided. There's so much on offer, and the Open House Film Project is amazing, but it's just part of what is the most ambitious and the most varied open house that I think London has had so far. So thank you everybody, and that's it. Bye.